A whole bunch of people are out in the hallway out there.
Okay, the screen's already up, so whenever you can call them here.
Clicker.
Clicker. Remember, it's the down arrow.
Down arrow is forward. That's why I asked you. It worked.
Good morning, Terry.
All right, folks, let's all get in here and sit down. It's time to get going. It's really like herding cats. Do you know that? Yeah. Like impossible to do. Okay. Get a Bible somehow. Open up to 1 John chapter 2, verse 15. We talked about verse 15 a little bit last week, beginning of verse 16, 15, 16, and 17. 1 John chapter 2, and if you have a hard time finding 1 John, it's just before Revelation, the very end of the New Testament. 1 John chapter 2, verse 15, starting. Do not love the world, nor the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the boastful pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world is passing away, and also its lusts, but the one who does the will of God abides forever. Like every other teaching in the New Testament, people goof it up. And these verses here have been goofed up. The first verse, don't love the world. The word world in Greek is cosmos. It's one of these favorite words that Nathan likes. And today we use the word cosmos to mean like the whole universe. But in the first century, the word world generically started out to mean just the earth, the planet, okay? But in the New Testament, it's used about 5 or 6 different ways. It doesn't mean the planet. It doesn't mean dirt. It doesn't mean the buildings and rocks and lakes and things like that. But there are people in the past, in messing up what should be fairly simple and easy to understand, have said that very thing. During the what's called the Middle Ages, 1200, 13, 14, 15, 1600, there were lots of people in Europe who were very religious people who said that if you worked hard to make more money, that was wrong because you were worldly. It was wrong to make money. It was wrong to build a bigger house for your family. It was wrong to buy property. It was wrong because your emphasis was on the worldly things and not on God. And so it was popular during those years especially for there to be monasteries with monks in them. And the monks were considered to be more spiritual than the common people because what did they do? They spent 100% of their time reading the Bible, praying. Sometimes they took a vow of silence where they never talked because that was distracting. That was part of the world. And so they would spend their entire time just meditating on God. Not very many monks anymore doing that kind of thing. But you see how that you can take an idea that's do not love the world, and you can take it to mean that it means don't care for your family. Don't try to live better. Don't try to help your family be better. Now, John himself explains what he means about do not love the world in the next verse, in verse 16. And he doesn't say the world here is buildings and houses and making money for your family. He says, for all that is in the world, he says 3 things. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. The important words in this sentence here in verse 16 are not flesh, eyes, and life. He's not saying it's wrong to have a body or to see things or live. The important things in this sentence here is lust and pride. That's what he's saying is wrong. And many times in the New Testament, when it talks about the world, that's what it's talking about. Not everything in the world, but the things that lead us away from God. Now that's a real simple idea. But you'd be surprised how many people are still alive today who have this other idea that if you get involved in the world in any way, that you're not spiritual, that you can't be a good Christian. There's a lot of people today still believe that. So what is he saying is wrong here? Last week we talked about the lust of the flesh. And this has a whole lot more to do with other things than just sex. Yeah?
Just like you're talking about the lust of the flesh, whatever, are we not to love agape the world?
Sure.
Good for them?
Sure. And in that way, we're talking about people in the world that need the gospel. And that world is used that way in the New Testament. Understanding words in the Bible can be difficult, but people get all goofed up when they don't clearly understand the different ways that words are used. And that's where careful Bible study becomes necessary. Lust of the flesh. What is lust of the flesh? The key word, remember, here is lust. A little bit more, but not just desire. We all have desires. And some people, by the way, that say all of our desires are wrong too. We shouldn't have desires. But that's not what it's talking about here. And it doesn't even mean strong desire. If you lust after something, a car, money, a person, whatever, take your pick. There's 1,000 different ways that people lust. What are you doing that's wrong? What is the wrong of that? Right. It's what you build your life around. It's what you think about all the time. It's what you will do virtually anything to get. And what's wrong with that? Because it's not a balance. We all need food, but you can lust after food. People do it, All they want to do is eat all the time. They find happiness. Hey, that's what my life is. Ben Franklin one time said, eat to live, not live to eat. Franklin ended up a real roly-poly guy, but that was a pretty good saying, really. Okay, lust of the flesh. The problem is not the flesh. The problem is the lust. You got to not let your brain get all wrapped up in one thing, and that's all you can think about. Any comments on that? What does that say? Okay, we'll look it up. Hold on, I'm going to get to you. Just a second. 1 Corinthians 10:13, the man said. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And people misuse this verse. They'll say there's no trouble that you can't handle. There's lots of trouble people have an impossible time handling. He's talking about sin here. He's talking about temptation. And that's correct. There is no temptation that you can't walk away from somehow. It may be difficult. You may have to do some drastic things to walk away from some temptations, but you don't have to. The devil doesn't make you sin, in other words. You had your hand up?
I was just going to say you're not supposed to want anything more than you want God. That
Yeah.
relationship and that.
What's more important to you? And some people build their lives, as Tom said, about making money. It's all money, 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 money. Well, what happens one day, and I used to work with some of these people, and when they had to retire, what happens to their life when they can't make money anymore? Or, for example, I did more interviews than you can dream of about people becoming disabled. What happens to a person when their life is revolved around making money, and that's all they think about, and one day they're disabled and they can't work anymore? I'm telling you, some of them go nuts because they've lost the reason that they're alive. And that's a sad, sad situation. And is money bad? No. Love of money is bad. And it's similar to the lust of the flesh. Lust of the eye. And it's not just what you can see, it's somebody seeing you. Think about that. You can think all the times about things that you can see and enjoy. Maybe traveling, which I love to do myself. But what if you're only interested in what somebody sees you? Look at me, me, and me. And this is for women as well as men. Men can be vain and proud and be all obsessed about their appearance and their clothes and everything else. And women can be too. You know, if a person's all interested in their hair and their clothing and nothing else, they've got a little problem here with lust of the eyes. Bill?
When I was in Baltimore, I went to church at a small congregation there, and the preacher was talking about modesty, and he included men in that as well.
Sure.
He was saying, like, as far as he was concerned, he said, men, you know, when we go swimming and stuff, he said, we're not being modest if we don't wear a shirt over, you know, we go without a shirt and stuff like that. We can be just as immodest as women can be. Just thought it was an interesting point.
Yep. Any other comments? Last one. New American Standard says the boastful pride of life. What does that mean to you? Or do you have some other words besides that in your translation?
I just got the pride of life.
Pride of life, yeah. See, it's not just pride. Good self-image is a good thing, unless you're evil all over. You know, that's not too good then if you have a good self-image and you're really, really bad. But a good self-image is good, and people that suffer from low self-image, they have all kinds of problems. But what happens if I have such a high self-image in everything that's involving me? Well, what does that mean about everybody else? Look down on them. They're no good. Free on you. Forget you. And that causes all kinds of problems. These are the things in the world that John says that Christians need to stay away from. Why? Because they don't help. They hurt you and they hurt other people. Julia, you were going to say something?
There's that big two-story house down on the left side of the road that you go net, like from here to Northfield, that's got the pond out there.
Yeah.
Years ago, the man that owned that, I don't know who's there now, said, if you have money, you don't need God.
Yeah.
Came right out and said it.
Sure.
He said it to the electrician.
Or in the movie that became famous, Douglas, first or last name is Douglas, he made famous the saying, greed is good. Not Kurt. Michael Douglas, his son. Michael Douglas said that. And about 10 years later, he made a public saying, I wish I hadn't said that in the movie. He said, I've come to realize that that's not a good attitude. The guy that said it in the movie, Michael Douglas, he apologized for having that line in that movie. But there's a world of people that believe greed is great. And they hurt their lives because of it. I said why, and we gave a short answer, but the end of verse 16 also says why in 17. It's not from the Father, but it's from the world, and the world is passing away, and its lusts. You see where he's saying that's the important thing he's talking about here? The lusts are passing away, but the one who does the will of God abides forever. Now that's a happy, wonderful saying for Christians to know is there. That's a promise to God, from God to us, that if we stay with God, we live forever. And that's a happy thing, not a sad thing. But the things of this world go away. They go away when we die, but they're also going to go away one of these days when the world goes away.
I was just going to say, John said in one verse what Solomon, whomever said in Ecclesiastes in 13 chapters, he goes through, takes all this and
Sure.
breaks it out.
Yeah.
Talks about all the things that people are willing to invest their time and their energy and they're focused on, and in the end, it's, it's all vanity, but emptiness.
Right.
So,
Yeah, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. That doesn't mean that everything is nothing. Like the Bohemian Rhapsody says, nothing matters. If you really believe nothing matters, you're a sad person. That's a terrible line in that song.
You asked the why, Jerry.
Yeah.
And it alters your focus and it alters your target.
Sure. Yeah. You have some purpose in life because God has told you why you're here. You're not just here to breathe and die. And there's a lot of folks that say that's it, all there is to life. There's no purpose, there's no goal in life, there's no nothing really in life. Just live until you die and then goodbye. What a depressing idea and incorrect, because God says there's more to this life than just here and now, and what I can grab and what I can see and what I can do and what I can steal from somebody else. Okay, any comments, verses 15, 16, and 17? The next section here is verses 18 through 24. And I'm not going to read it right now because this is the 6th week we're in this class, and I've been waiting 6 weeks for what we're going to do right now. And I hope we'll get finished with it. We've got about 25 minutes. But we're going to talk about what it talks about just in verse 18 and then down in verse 22 and a couple other verses. We're going to talk today about what and who is Antichrist. And when I mentioned this to Dave this morning, what did you immediately say to me? It's a big thing now. And I was going to say, you could go home today and turn on the radio or turn on TV, and you'll hear somebody talking about Antichrist, and most of them don't know what they're talking about. And I'm saying to you that it may be in the next 25 minutes, we're going to read a few verses here, and I'm going to try my best to say nothing of what I think, and I'm going to ask you some very specific questions, and at the end, I want you to tell me what Antichrist was or is. And I think that you can do it. Okay? Let's see what we can do. First of all, 1 John 3:18. Now, here's what I want you to do. Hey, he's supposed to turn something on. Yeah, okay. I got a little visual here. First of all, what does the word Antichrist mean? You may be surprised to know that it comes from the Greek word Antichrist. Antichristos. What does anti mean? Against, contrary to, doesn't like. So we have antifreeze, and that means we don't like our radiator freezing up. Antifreeze, your radiator doesn't freeze up. We got antibiotic, and what does antibiotic mean? Kills the bugs, kills germs. Bio means life, but here it means killing germs, okay? And just, this is stray sideways. Virus is not a living germ, and there's no antibiotic for a virus. And I'm telling you, doctors have this complaint all the time. I got a virus, give me a pill so I can get rid of it. Virus doesn't work that way. You can have a vaccine to help you not get it, and even then it's not 100% guaranteed. And people get very angry about this. I had both my shots. I can't get COVID. Well, guess what? You can have both your shots, and it's possible you can get COVID, because even the best ones are like 80% effective. That means 20% not so effective. Okay, anyway, antibiotic kills germs, anti-germs. Anti-gun. Well, who's the anti-gun people? Boo on guns. They don't like guns. So what does Antichrist mean? Against Christ. And it's not a title, it's a description. It's a person who's against Christ. Can there be somebody who's against Christ today? Yes. But we're not talking about that kind of thing. We're talking about what is John talking about when he says Antichrist. Okay? Before I get into that, I want to do something else with you. And that is, how do people talk about Antichrist today? And you can read the paragraph as I'm going along here. There's 100 different ways that people talk about Antichrist and argue with each other and write books against each other and have seminars about all of this. But there's a very few things that almost all of them agree on. Number one, he's not here yet, but he's coming soon. You know how long people have been arguing about Antichrist? About 1900 years. Do you know how long they've been saying he's been going to come soon? About 1900 years. Which ought to tell you something right there, okay? He's not here yet, but he's going to come here soon. Number two, he's going to lead a war against Christ, Christians, and Jews at a place. The place is called Armageddon. You ever heard of Armageddon before? My sister visited Armageddon. How could she do that? Because Armageddon is a real place in the real world. It's a little area about 15 miles southeast of Mount Carmel, which is a mountain on the coastline of Israel that sticks out into the Mediterranean. It's about 15 miles southeast of that. And it's named Armageddon because it was near a town called Megiddo. And Megiddo maybe doesn't sound like Geddon, but the two words are connected. And it was a crossroads of travel and a crossroads of armies. There's a road that from thousands of years ago has gone north and south through Israel, not far away from the Mediterranean Sea. There's another road that crosses that at a spot, and these two roads were the ways that armies would come into Israel to fight battles. And they met at that spot, which is today Armageddon. Okay? So it's a place that there's been wars in the past. In fact, there was a pretty good battle fought during World War I at that spot, Armageddon. And back then, people, of course, said, that means Christ's going to come into the world in 1917, but, that didn't happen. Okay, at any rate, number one, he's not here yet, but he's coming soon. Number two, when he gets here, he's going to lead a war of Christ, Christians, and Jews against the rest of the world, of the bad people. And number three, he, the Antichrist, will lose that war and die. This is what the people they have all kinds of details, but this is the real three solid points. And then after Antichrist loses the war and dies, Christ will come to his throne in Jerusalem and rule for 1,000 years. This teaching is called premillennialism, and there's lots of churches that teach it today. Okay, now I'd like you to forget everything you just saw up there. Because you're going to find that when we go into these 4 verses in the Bible talking about Antichrist, it's none of these things. Not one of them. Okay? Now here's where I'm going to kind of not tell you what I think. I'm going to start with the verses, and here's what I want you to do. How is Antichrist described in these 4 verses? Actually, we're going to read a couple of verses before and after on some of these. But the 4 passages, how is Antichrist described in the 4 verses where the word is found? Don't tell me who you think Antichrist is yet. We'll get to that at the end. Don't tell me what you think from other verses in the Bible. Look at these verses themselves and tell me what these verses say that Antichrist is. And when we get done with all of this, we're going to answer the question, who is the Antichrist in 1 John and 2 John? You understand? I've really been looking forward to this, folks, for quite a while. Okay, the first one, 1 John 2:18. Listen to the words. I'm asking you a question. What does John say about Antichrist? And we're going to read verses 18 and 19. 1 John 2:18 and 19. Children. Who is children, by the way? The good Christians. Children, it is the last hour. And just as you've heard that Antichrist is coming, even now many Antichrists have arisen. From this we all know it is the last hour. They went out from us, but they were not really of us, for if they had been of us, they would have remained with us, but they went out in order that it might be shown that they all are not of us. Remember what I said to you the rules are? Don't tell me from other verses. Tell me from these verses right here, 1 John 2, 18 and 19, what does it say about Antichrist? False teachers that had come out of Christians. Somebody else? Nathan? Plural. And not just plural, it says many. And is it talking about the future? Already came. Do you see that? You just see that clearly? What else?
They're going to be made known that they were not of us.
That's verse 19, I guess, right? Okay, and what else in verse 19? Right. The first words. They went out from us. Who is us? The good Christians. Who's the they? The Antichrists who left. Right? Again, I'm not telling you what I'm thinking. I'm just reading the words, just like you are. So, I did a little summary of what I think you find here in 1 John 2, 18 and 19. Okay, that's going to stay up on the board. Now we're going to drop down to verse 22, same chapter, 1 John 2, verse 22. Who is the liar but the one who denies that Jesus is the Christ? This is the Antichrist, the one who denies the Father and the Son. What does this verse say about the Antichrist? Well, one at a time, Bill.
They're refusing to believe in Jesus.
Right. Okay. Yeah, this one's pretty straightforward, but specifically about Jesus. They deny that Jesus is Messiah or Christ. Remember, Christ is not his last name, it's a title. It means the Messiah, the one promised from God in the Old Testament. Okay? The one that God said was going to be coming. And also, the last part of the verse says, this is the one who denies the Father and the Son. Got it? Okay, I got that up there. Denies Jesus as a Christ and denies the Father and the Son. Okay, the third verse we're going to look at is in 1 John chapter 4. Turn over to 1 John chapter 4. And here, to get the full context, we need to read chapter 4, verses 1 through 3. Okay? Same question. What do these verses say about the Antichrist? Chapter 4, verse 1. Beloved. Who's the beloved? The good Christians. Keep that in mind, because there's good Christians and bad Christians through here. These are the good Christians. Do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God. And every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. And this is the spirit of the Antichrist, of which you have heard that it is coming, and now it is already in the world. Okay, come on. What do the words say? How do these three verses describe the Antichrist?
Same thing, they're not acknowledging Jesus, they came from God.
Yes, but more specific. Does not confess that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh. Okay? And more. Something else.
They're already here.
They're already here. And in verse 1, what are they called? You already said that. False prophets. More. What else does it say? Sure.
Back in doesn't say anything about the Spirit. But now it's talking about the Spirit. I noticed that as a
Well, okay. Let's go back to this. Good comment. Chapter 4, verse 1. When he says Spirit here, test the spirits to see whether they are from God. Is that talking about the Holy Spirit? Test the spirits to see if they are from God? It's not talking about the Holy Spirit here. It's talking about who? People. It's not talking about the Holy Spirit. It's talking about people to see if they, who they, verse 1, the false prophets, to see if they are from God or not. And how do you decide if these people who are teaching are from God or not? Well, verse 2. Every spirit, meaning every person that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh, is from God. That's the people who are saying the truth. But verse 3, every spirit, meaning every person who does not confess Jesus, is not from God. It's not talking about the Holy Spirit here. It's talking about people.
Well, my question is,
Why what?
talking about the Holy Spirit? God the Father.
Oh, okay. Very good. We talked about this a little while before when you were coming. We talked about the general beliefs that all the Gnostics had. And I'm breaking my rule here that I said I was going to do, but I'm trying to answer your question. When it says in verse 22, the Antichrist is the one who denies the Father and the Son, they said that Jesus was not the Son of God, that the Father was not the Father of Jesus. They said that Jesus was a created being who was below God, that God sent to come on the earth. But he was not the Son of God, and he was not God. He was a created inferior being. And that's why John says here in verse 22 that they deny the Father and the Son. It's the actual words they're denying. He's not the Father, he's not the Son. You with me? Okay, let's go back now to John 4. John 4:4, verses 1 to 3. There's more here in verses 1 to 3.
There's more coming. There will be more that deny Jesus.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
You're already here, and there's going to be more that's going to be used in
His word says, you have heard it is coming, and now it is already in the world. The it is, again, people. People who are false teachers. People who are saying that Jesus didn't come in the flesh, and so on. Verse 4. 3. Yeah, now it's already in the world. And this is the Antichrist. By the words. He uses the word. Antichrist. The false prophets. One more. Turn over a page. 2 John. 2 John doesn't have chapters. It just has 13 verses. And this is the last time that you're going to find the word Antichrist in the Bible. 2 John 7. Just verse 7. Short verse. Here's what I put up for 1 John 4. And then I just put the whole verse up for 2 John 7. Okay, here's the last time. There's only 4. For many deceivers have gone out into the world, those who do not acknowledge Jesus Christ is coming in the flesh. This is the deceiver and the Antichrist. What does the fourth one say, describing the Antichrist? Deceiver, yeah. Deceiver. Okay? And specifically, what are they teaching incorrectly? In the verse. No, not the Messiah didn't come. They do not acknowledge Jesus Christ as coming in the flesh. And that's said before in these other verses. Okay. Anything else you find in these 4 verses? Because then we're going to go on to question number 2 that people have been arguing about for almost 2,000 years. And these are the only verses that talk about Antichrist. Okay? Who's the Antichrist? Don't answer. You'll have your chance in a minute. I'll give you one hint. This is in 1 John 2 and 4, right? What have we've been studying all the way through 1 John chapter 1? Who are we talking about all the way through 1 John chapter 1? Remember I said there's only one answer to the question of the bad people? I gave it away, didn't I? You didn't say it, but I tried to give you a hint. The Gnostics. The Gnostics. They're already here in the first century. So much for number one. He's not here yet, but he's coming soon. Remember how they teach it today? They're not here fighting a war against other people, a real battle on earth. Doesn't say anything about that. And, what was the number 3? Oh, after the war he dies. Doesn't say anything about them dying. The real Gnostics were around the end of the first century, all the way through the second century, and they finally died out early in the third century.
How did they come up with those 3 reasons that you said in the beginning? How did they relate that to Antichrist? It doesn't say anything about Antichrist.
Glad you answered that question. And I didn't know if I would get to this today. But I've got about 5 minutes, and I'm going to do what I can. And yes, we are going to stop at 10:45 today. That's the new unbreakable rule. We're going to do this. Stop at 10:45. So we got 6 minutes. I'm going to try to answer your question and what I can in 6 minutes, and then we'll continue with this maybe next week. Because they believe Antichrist is talked about in other verses in the Bible that don't say the word Antichrist. And they want to tie these verses with the other verses in the Bible. Now, I'm here to tell you, in the next 5 minutes, if there was a premillennial sitting in this audience, they would get so angry at me that they would probably just start getting red in the face. What are the other verses that they go to? Matthew 24:24 talks about false Christs. And they say the false Christs of Matthew 24 are the same as the Antichrist in 1 John. Number 2, they say the man of lawlessness in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 1 through 10, it's a long section, is talking about the Antichrist. And number 3, they say the beast of the sea in Revelation 13:2 is also talking about the Antichrist. They say that all 4 the beast of the sea in Revelation 13:2. Beast of the sea. It's one of the figure of speeches that John uses in Revelation to talk about how that the good and evil are fighting each other in Revelation. The beast of the sea is a bad thing, a really, really bad thing. And they say that's the Antichrist. Now, does the Bible connect all 4 of these words together? That is Antichrist, false Christ, man of lawlessness, and beast of the sea? No. But the answer to your question is they try to put all of the verses involving these 4 things into one teaching and put it into today's world. And we know flat that that's incorrect because 1 John clearly says Antichrist was alive right then. Yes?
Did you get those verses?
Sure. False Christ is Matthew 24:24. The man of lawlessness, sometimes it's called the man of sin, is in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3. But you really got to read verses 1 through 10 because it's a long section there. And the third one is Revelation chapter 3, verse 2. But you really need you need to read about half of Revelation 13 to see all it says about the beast of the sea. Now, I would say to them, how do you prove that all 4 of these are talking about the same thing? The same person, in the future, having a war of some kind. There's nothing in the Bible that says that. And if you read these others, you will find that there are other explanations for what these others in Matthew and Thessalonians and Revelation are talking about. For example, in Matthew 24, the topic in Matthew 24:24 is not the end of the world or a war at the end of the world. It's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. And it's very easy to look at Matthew 24 and say that the false Christs, mentioned in Matthew 24 is talking about people that would come along before the destruction of Jerusalem and say that they were Christ come back to earth. And there were people that were doing that before the destruction of Jerusalem. And that Jesus was warning his disciples that in their own lifetime there would be people that would come saying that they were Christ come back to the earth. In 2 Thessalonians 2:3, the man of lawlessness, if you read verses 1 through 10, I'm not going to go through all of that because I don't have time and I don't want to. But you can easily read that to see that he's talking about some specific ruler that's coming pretty soon who's going to be really, really angry with Christians. And it's real easy to think that this guy was very possibly Nero, who was a Roman emperor in the 80s, and he persecuted Christian ruler, the ruler over the empire they lived in, who was going to cause Christians a whole lot of trouble. That's another possible answer for who the man of sin is. And the beast of the sea in Revelation 13, Lord, we could spend a long time on this one, but I'm not going to do that either. The beast of the sea, there is another very good possible explanation of the beast of the sea, and that's talking about the Roman Empire itself, with the religion of the Roman Empire that said you had all of these gods that you had to worship, and if you didn't worship these gods, we're going to kill you, we're going to take away your job, we're going to put you in the Colosseum to have the lions eat you and stuff like that, which did end up happening in the 1st and 2nd centuries. You see, these different verses don't necessarily mean they're talking about one thing. All bad things, but not necessarily the same bad thing. But you see, they like to wrap it up all in the word of Antichrist. Okay? And when we read the verses in the Bible that talk about Antichrist, what do we find? Not what they say. And it's 15 till, and I'm going to stop. We'll continue this some next week. We haven't actually read the section in 1 John chapter 2. Next week we're going to start at verse 18 and go through verse 24. But I wanted to give you this thing about Antichrist to see that the world can mess up anything. And they have messed up a simple teaching of people, John saying there's going to be people who are against Christ, and I'm going to tell you who they are. They're the people who say that Jesus didn't come in the flesh. And who were those people? The Gnostics.